Masechet Yevamot, Daf Yod. Our Mishnah listed 15 cases in which a brother is called upon to perform Yibum, except that one of the Yevamot is his close relative, is an Adva. And therefore, in all those cases, he may not perform Yibum, or he doesn't have to do Chalitza, and he doesn't do Yibum or Chalitza also to the co-wives of the Yevamah, who is Edva to him. Very good. So we saw all those cases, and today we're wondering about other possible cases. Why did you say only 15? Why not 16? So we're going to see various candidates of cases that could have been added. And right now we are continuing a discussion with one that we began talking about yesterday, where Levi asks a question to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and says, how come you don't add another one? And the B says, I know which one you want to add. The father's rape victim. It seems to me that Levi, you have no brain in your head, right? Because that would be ridiculous to add such a case. And that's the conversation. And what we're going to try to figure out is, why does Rabbi Yehuda Nasi not want to include that case? Levi, in the end of the discussion, all the way at the bottom of the Amud, Levi is going to end up actually adding this father's case in his Baraitot. So he thinks that it is a good candidate, but Levi does not. Okay, so there's three reasons, possibilities why Levi does not include the father's rape, the case of the father's rape victim. Let's review what this case is. We have here Levi, who is fully married to Miriam and has a legitimate child, Shimon. Levi, however, also raped a woman, Shifra, and had a child with her, Menashe. And after that, Shimon decided he would like to, he married Leah, that's fine. And he decided he also wants to marry Shifra. That is his father's rape victim. Okay, so Shimon would never be allowed to marry his father's wife, even if it was not his mother. But because they were never married, so according to the majority opinion, this is a permitted marriage. According to the Yehuda, it's prohibited. So let's say Shimon does that. He's following the majority opinion. Even according to the Yehuda, by the way, if he does it with the avad, if it has a marriage, the marriage is valid, because there's no isur karet here. The general rule is anytime there's an isur karet, the marriage, even if you do a full ceremony, does not take effect. If there's not an isur karet, then it does take effect, even though it's prohibited. Okay, so Shimon goes ahead and he has married now to two women, Leah and Shifra, who happens to be his half-brother's mother. Shimon dies, and now Menashe is called upon to perform Yibum for his brother Shimon, and here's the problem. One of the co-wives is his mother, that's Adva, and so therefore he would not perform Yibum with her, and therefore would not be able to perform Yibum with the co-wife, that would be his mother's co-wife, or Imo Anusat Aviv, his mother, who is the rape victim of his father. And so you see that this is a perfect case that fits into the same pattern as all the other 15 cases, where one of the Yevamot is an Edva relation, and therefore that would poter also the co-wife. And so this looks like a good case that Levi wants to add into the Mishnah, and so he should. Why not? Okay, so we already saw one answer yesterday, that the B says, I don't want to include any controversial cases into the Mishnah. Now we're assuming the Yehuda Nasi did not include any controversial cases, and this case would follow Rabbanan, who say that a son is permitted to marry his father's rape victim, but the Yehuda prohibits the son from marrying this father's rape victim, and therefore this would be a controversial case, and we only want to have unanimous cases listed in the Mishnah. All right, we challenged that very rule that we have no controversial cases, because we saw there's other cases in later chapters that are subject to controversy. So we say, no, we just mean in the first chapter, we don't want controversial cases. We want to start off with unanimous. Okay, so even in this chapter, the Bet Shammai would disagree with our first Mishnah, because he thinks that the co-wife of an Edva is permitted. All right, so we say Bet Shammai doesn't count in our Mishnah. All right, then we talk about the case of a brother born later. That's mentioned as one of the 15. He was born after the older brother died, and the Rabbi Shimon is more lenient in those cases. But we saw even Rabbi Shimon would agree in one variation of such a case, and so in at least one variation, it is unanimous. Fine. And there we brought Rabbi Chia's double rule that we're going to continue to talk about today. Rabbi Chia's double rule is that for each of the 15 cases in the Mishnah, one could construct such a scenario in which you would have two sisters who are both Yevamot to each other, and that muteret asura lazeh, muteret lazeh, and surviving brothers, one of the surviving brothers would be able to do yibum with one of the sisters, and the other surviving brother with another one of the sisters. And you can construct such a scenario for all 15 cases. All right, we saw a couple of examples. They are complex but fun puzzles to figure out how to construct all these cases. All right, that's Rabbi Chia's rule. We had three interpretations of Rabbi Chia's rule, which Rav Yehuda said it doesn't apply to all 15 cases, only the last 9 cases, because for the first 6, you'd have to introduce a situation of rape in order for it to happen, and we don't want that. We want our Mishnah to be nice cases, and therefore with full marriage. And so he applies it not to those cases. Fine. Abaye applies the rule to all cases except for the brother who's born later, because that case was subject to a machloket between Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon. And he wants to make sure we have no machloket here. So we're okay. If we follow Abaye, then we can include Rabbi Chia's double rule, and we won't apply it to that last case. And again, there's no controversies in the Mishnah, and so we're all good. And that's why we don't have the Levi's case either. Okay, so that works. But we saw yet another answer, which is we're going to apply Rabbi Chia in all cases. But Rabbi Chia disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi disagrees with Rabbi Chia. In other words, we can apply, in fact, we'll leave Rabbi Chia alone. Rabbi Chia applies it to all cases. But who said Rabbi Yehuda Nasi has to agree with Rabbi Chia? Right? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had his own thoughts about which cases to apply, and applied only non-controversial cases. And he doesn't have to be subject to that limitation that all cases have to fit into the double rule. And that was what we ended with. Okay, good. So all that fits into the no controversial cases answer. And now we're going to move into a second answer of Rava, and then we'll see one by Rav Asher. So Rava says that the reason that, in fact, not the opposite of this last case, that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, in fact, does agree with Rabbi Chia's double rule, and he thinks that all cases have to fit into the double rule. And he doesn't care about controversy. He has no problem including controversial cases. So just because the father's rape victim is a controversial case, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, that's fine. He doesn't care, doesn't mind that. But rather, the reason he doesn't include the father's rape victim is because it does not fit into Rabbi Chia's rule. And even Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wants all cases to fit into Rabbi Chia's double rule. Okay, so let's see that inside. Rav Ada Karchina Kameh de Rav Kahana Amar Mishme de Rava Le'olam. This is all said in the name of Rava. Le'olam it le de Rabbi Hani Kelale. In fact, Rabbi agrees with the double rule of Rabbi Chia that all cases in the Mishnah should be able to have a scenario in which you have two sisters who also are two sister-in-laws, and one surviving brother can marry one, and the other surviving brother can marry the other. And here's the problem, Levi, with your case. If the case of the mother, the Yavam's mother, who was also the rape victim of his father, you can find such a scenario where that one of Rabbi Chia's rule would apply, but not that both of Rabbi Chia's rules would apply. That is impossible. So, for example, Yaakov shete achayot anas. Let's say Yaakov is that father who raped two sisters. Achota shehi yevimta mashkachat la. So then we can have a case where there are two sisters that are also sisters-in-law. But there was no way that they would be permitted to two of the brothers. So that you don't have that that rule that one could marry, that there could be yibum. Whereas if he had raped two women who are not sisters, nachriyot does not mean non-Jews, it just means that they're not related to each other. Then you could have a case where two surviving brothers will do perform yibum, but this is, in this case, they are not sisters. So you don't have a case that's sisters who are also sisters-in-law. All right, let's turn to a chart to explain these cases. And so here you go. Here's the first case where no one's going to be able to do yibum with each other, although they are two sisters. So you have Yaakov who raped two sisters, Rachel and Leah. He had a child with Rachel, Levi, and a child with Leah, who is Yehuda. So these are born out of wedlock. They're not mamzerim because there was no prohibition. There's no relation between Yaakov and Rachel. There's not Eshet Ish or anything. Okay, so that now Yaakov also has two legitimate sons, Reuben and Shimon. So you have four brothers, right? And these are from marriage. Levi and Yehuda are from two different rape victims who are sisters. Now, one day, Reuven and Shimon die. And, one more step before that, Reuven marries Rachel and Shimon marries Leah, right? Reuven is allowed to marry his father's rape victim, according to the majority opinion. And so he does so. And Shimon also marries the rape victim of his father, Leah. Okay, these two men die. And now it falls upon Levi and Yehuda to perform yibum. So how's it going to work? Can Levi perform yibum on Reuven's wife? Well, that's his mother, so that's impossible. Can he perform the yibum with Shimon's wife? Well, Leah is true, is his sister-in-law, but it's also his mother's sister. That's his aunt. And that's one of the adayot. And so Levi could not do yibum with Rachel, his mother, or his mother's sister. And Yehuda would be the same thing. Either one would be his mother or his mother's sister. And so here, yes, I can construct a case regarding a father's rape victim where there are two sisters who are also sisters-in-law, but we do not have the rule of asura lazeh muteret lazeh. Everyone is asura to both of the brothers. Asurot to both of the brothers. Okay, now we have another subcase here where it would be permitted. The problem here is that you lose out on the sisters. Okay, how could you perform a case? Have such a case where they're not sisters? Yaakov rapes two women who are not related to each other, Rachel, and has a child Levi with them. He also rapes Leah and has a child Yehuda. He also has two legitimate children, Reuven and Shimon, from his wife. Now, Reuven marries Rachel, his father's rape victim. Shimon marries Leah, his father's rape victim. And then Reuven and Shimon die. In such a case, Levi and Yehuda are called upon to perform yibum. Levi cannot perform yibum for Reuven because that wife is his mother. It's no good. But the wife of Shimon is permitted to him. It's his sister and it's his sister-in-law. That's the classic case of yibum. It also happens to be his father's rape victim. So what? That's totally fine. It's not related to his mother. So Levi can perform yibum with Leah and Yehuda can perform yibum with Rachel. So yes, you can have that, but not in the case of sisters. So neither of these scenarios follows both rules of Rabbi Chia, and that explains why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, I cannot have this case in the Mishnah. It does not follow the rules of Rabbi Chia. Okay, good. So that concludes Rav's very nice answer. It's just a fascinating answer because in number one, we were trying to figure out how Rabbi gets out of Rabbi Chiya's rule, whereas in number two, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi actually relies on Rabbi Chiya's rule in order to reject Levi's case of the father's rape victim. Now, third is Rav Asher, which is that our Mishnah, in fact, follows Rabbi Yehuda. Right, in the first one, we said he doesn't want to include controversial cases, and Rabbi Yehuda in general prohibits a rape victim, and so that's why he doesn't want to put it in here. Rav Asher says, in a way more simply, that the whole Mishnah is in fact Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and that because he prohibits, that's why you he prohibits a son from marrying his father's rape victim. Therefore, he would never have such a case. Now we're going to ask, it could be a b'diavad case, because the b'diavad Yehuda agrees that such a marriage would be okay, would apply. We're going to answer and say, no, we don't want to include b'diavad cases. But then we're going to say, even if you don't have a b'diavad case, we could construct a case that it would involve mamzerut. But we could construct such a case where it would fit. And so we're going to say, no, we don't want to include a case that has mamzerut. Okay, so let's see Rav Asher's answer. Rav Asher amar leolam let Rabbi Yehuda let Rabbi hanekelale. Okay, in fact, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi does not have to fit into Rabbi Chiya's rules. And he has no problem including mahaloket. So in other words, Rav Asher is disagreeing with the second answer before him and the first answer above. He has a new answer altogether. So if so, how come Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said to Levi, I think Levi has no brain in his head that he wants to include the case of the father's rape victim? Well, what's wrong with it? Why not? That what she said, he has no brain in his head. Why did he say that? This is what he meant to say. How come you didn't look carefully at our Mishnah, the first Mishnah? Because our Mishnah, in fact, has to be the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Don't get confused. Rabbi Yehuda is the fourth generation. Rabbi Yehuda, who says Asar ba'anusat aviv. And it's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the fifth generation Tana, talking and explaining the Mishnah has to be according to Rabbi Yehuda of the fourth generation. Sarotehen mutarot, immo, ve'eshet aviv, ve'achot aviv. This is the next Mishnah that's going to occur in our Perek. We're going to see it in Daf Yud Gemel. And this Mishnah lists 6 forbidden relationships that are chamurot me'elu, that are more stringent than the 15 enumerated in ours, in that these women can only marry outsiders. They cannot marry any of the paternal brothers, and that's well, as we'll see. And because of that, because they would never be allowed to marry any of the brothers. It could never happen that the Yavam will be related to the Yevamot, because he would not have been able to marry, because none of the brothers would have been if the deceased brother cannot be with them, then none of his other paternal brothers could be with her either. And so therefore saroten mutarot, the co-wife, is permitted, and we list the first 3 cases on that list. So now we're going to prove from this Mishnah that the author of the Mishnah must be Rabbi Yehuda of the 4th generation, Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli. And therefore, the first Mishnah also is Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli, who prohibits a son from marrying his father's rape victim. Okay, how are we going to prove that from here? From the following doubling. My imo, what do you mean mother? Aviv, hainu eshet aviv. If it's his mother, then it's also going to be isn't it also going to be the wife of his father? So that's the same as the second case, Eshet Aviv, Elalav Anusat Aviv. Rather, the case of Imo must mean that it's the father's rape victim. Okay, let's see this in a chart. Here is the case of Imo that this next Mishnah is referring to. Moshe is married to Esther. He also is married to Hannah. Hannah has a child, Reuven, from a previous marriage, and Moshe dies. This is not a case of Yibum, right? Because in these 6 cases, there is no Yibum. There's no possibility of Yibum. So Moshe dies. So and now that's all. I mean, nothing needs to happen. And Reuven is this is his mother, so that's fine. And now Reuven, however, wants to marry Esther. That is his stepfather's wife, right? It's his mother's co-wife. This is permitted because even if there were other brothers, right, from Esther, from anyone, none of the brothers would be able to be married to Hannah because Hannah is his father's wife, and so you cannot be married to one's father's wife, right? If it's Moshe's child, so therefore none of them would be ever able to marry Hannah, and so the case of Yibum would not, and so there's no Yibum case possible here with any other brothers. So therefore, because of that, Reuben is permitted to his father's co-wife, his mother's co-wife. Okay, so that is the case of Imo. Now, here's the question. Not very good. The case of Imo. Now, isn't his Reuben's mother? Isn't that also his? Here's Rav Asher's point. Everybody has a mother and a father. Usually, they are married to each other. So, if you construct a case of mother, where it would not be possible to do Yibum, and in that case, the co-wife is permitted. So that case of mother wouldn't be the same as his father's wife, because his father's mother is the same as his father's wife. So why do you have to count them as 2 separate cases? Rather, the father's wife includes a case of his mother when his parents are married. Elalav, so therefore the case of Imo is referring to a different case of Anusat Aviv, where his mother is not married to his father. How could that be? If they had a child out of wedlock, for example, if the father had raped the mother. And so therefore, you see, the next Mishnah includes Anusat Aviv. Now, in these cases, why in such a case can this child, for example, would be able to marry his mother's co-wife because he cannot marry her. So, and none of the brothers would be able to, right? None of the siblings of Moshe would be able to marry Hannah because she can only marry another outside person. Therefore, Reuven is permitted to his mother's co-wife. And so everybody on this list, it says, can be married to others, but not to any of the brothers. And so that means in the case now that we established that the Mishnah is talking about Anusat Aviv, this shows that Anusat Aviv, his father's rape victim, can only be married outside the family. If she goes and remarries, she cannot marry any of the father's children. Any of the rapist's children. And so only marry others. She can marry others. She cannot marry any of those, of the brothers of her son, even paternal brothers. Who thinks that? Rabbi Yehuda dasar b'anusat aviv mishum hachi la tani le, and it's because Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says one is not permitted to marry his father's rape victim, and therefore the next Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. Has to be, and therefore our first Mishnah must also be the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. And that is why we have only 15 and not 16 cases, Levi. That's why we do not include the case of Anusat Aviv, because it's all the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, who says that one is not allowed to marry his father's rape victim. Good. Amar leRavina Rav Asher. Rav Yehuda nami mashkachat la di'i avar v'nasev. So Ravina challenges Rav Asher and says, even according to the Yehuda about Eli, although one is not permitted to take his father's rape victim, if he does it b'di'avad, then the marriage does take effect. And so you could still have such a case, right? This is the case that we were dealing with this whole time. And although it's true, Shimon is not permitted to take shifra, if he goes ahead and does kiddushin, gives her a ring, then the kiddushin is valid. And then if he dies, we would have a case where Menashe, the surviving brother, cannot be with his mother and therefore could not be with the co-wife. And so it's actually could be, even according to the Yehuda, you could include this case as a b'di'avad. And his answer, Rav Asher's answer is, De'i lakatane. No, we're not giving if cases, b'di'avad cases. Good. Next question. Amar Rav Asher Rav Kahana, Belo de'i nami mashkachat la. Yaakov anas kalato veholid mimenu ben umet Ruven belo banim venafla la kame beraha umigodi asira asarata name asira. Oh, actually, we can have a case of a father's rape victim even if it does not involve a son marrying the father's rape victim. How so? Here is the scenario. If one has Yaakov, right? Yaakov has a son, Reuven, and Reuven marries two women, Pu'ah and Shifra. And then one day, Yaakov rapes his Shifra. That's his daughter-in-law. That is prohibited. So very terrible thing to do. What a mess. Anyway, he does that, and he has a child with her named Levi. Okay, so this child is a mamzer because he took his daughter, his son's, his daughter-in-law. So that's mamzerut. If they're married, then there would also be adultery. But even if they're not married, it's still, even if they're no longer married. Okay, so anyway, he would be a mamzer. And now Reuven dies. They have to still be married, right? So Reuven dies. And Levi is called upon to perform yibum. Now, Levi cannot possibly perform yibum with Shifra because they're brothers, right? They do have the same father. And now he cannot perform yibum with Shifra because that's his mother. And in this case, he would not be able to perform yibum with Pu'ah either, as Sarat Imo. And so this case fits perfectly well within the first Mishnah. This should be added as another one, number 16, where it says his father's rape victim, right? And also happens to be his mother, and that's why it is not allowed. And so why not include this? So this is the question that now actually Rav Asher asks on his own answer, right? Rav Asher is troubled with his own response, right? All this was Rav Asher saying the Mishnah actually follows Rabbi Yehuda. We proved that he follows Rabbi Yehuda, and we said it could be a b'di'avad case. No, we're not including b'di'avad cases. And then Rav Asher himself asking says, I can construct a case that is not a b'di'avad case. It's true, it involves mamzerut, but it's not a b'di'avad, and it does follow Rabbi Yehuda. So why not include this case? And Avkana helps him out. The Mishnah is only talking about cases of legitimate brothers, but brothers who are illegitimate, whereas one is a mamzer, we're not talking about such a case. Okay, that ends Rav Asher's answer. And after all that, even though Rabbi gave a harsh rejection of Levi and said, you have no brain in your head. And we just saw three reasons why it should not be included. Nevertheless, Levi in fact put it in his version of the Mishnayot. He had Baraitot that he taught, and in his Baraitot we have the Tane Levi. Imo pamim poter sarata, pamim ena poter sarata. A case of a mother, sometimes it will if she falls to yibum, she will exempt the other co-wife, and sometimes it does not. How so? Kesad. Haita imo nesuat abiv. If the mother was married to the father, v'niset la'achiv le'me'aviv umet, and married the paternal brother and died, zohi imo she'en poteret tzarata. In that case, the mother would not exempt the co-wife. Okay, so let's see that case. Is here. Yeah. That is a case where Yaakov is married to two women not related to each other. And he has a child with Naomi, Reuven, he has a child with the other wife, Shimon. And Shimon happens to also be married to Rachel. And Shimon tries to marry Naomi. Now, it means he gives her a ring. He says, they have a band, they get a hall. They do a whole wedding ceremony. Doesn't matter. Their marriage does not take hold because this is his father's wife. That's one of the arayot, karet. And so therefore, since they are never actually married, when he dies, Reuven is permitted to perform yibum with Rachel. It's not even a case of a co-wife because Naomi is actually not even a wife. That's the whole point. Because even though Shimon had this illicit relationship with Naomi, they are not married. And in that case, Reuven is permitted to perform yibum with Rachel. And so that is a case where that is not exempt. And the case where it would be exempt is the one that we saw earlier. Is the classic case like this, where because this is a permitted relationship according to Rabbanan, therefore they would be able to do this. Although according to the B Yehuda, it's an illegal relationship, but if you do it, it still works b'di avad. And this is Levi. Levi says, I'm fine. I'm okay to include a b'di avad case, even though it's b'di avad according to the B Yehuda. And lechet techila according to Rabbanan, and it's controversial. Doesn't matter. Levi says I include such a case. So here's the case where if they're married, and if they're not married, if the mother was the rape victim of the father and married one of the paternal brothers and died, then that is the classic case that we've been talking about this whole time, in which, because it's the mother of one of them, and this was a legitimate marriage, therefore, this erva is poter, the co-wife. And that concludes this section, that in fact, although Levi asked Rabbi, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi gave all these answers and rejected it, nevertheless, Levi thought that this case should be included in the list of 15. We should add this one as a 16th. We've now established that Levi will include the case of the father's rape victim, even though it would involve a b'di avad case, according to the Biudai. Couldn't marry, but if he does, then we would have such a case that would fit into the 15, so he would make it 16. But once Levi does include a b'di avad case, now we're going to ask about yet another possible b'di avad case, which is that he should then also add to the list, which is a Halusa who he then remarries, which we're going to see is subject to a machloket between Yochanan and Resh Lakish, and they're going to be the ones that are discussing it. So let's see this interesting case. So we just concluded, and Levi's opinion is, even though the rabbis in the Mishnah say 15, really we should add 16th, the father's rape victim. Good. And now a question. Levi, Resh Lakish asks, according to Levi, Levi said that even if someone should do this, even though they're not allowed to do it, if they do it, if the marriage is valid, he's including b'di avad cases, then let him include also this following case. Litni, hacholes li'ivimto, v'chazar v'kiddesha, umet belo banim. Okay, someone who can do yibum or chalitza. If that brother decides to do chalitza, then there's a prohibition from him ever being together with that woman again, right? You had the opportunity to do yibum, and really this is eshet ach, which is erva. But because of the mitzvah of Yibum, we say, you know what? We push aside the edva of your sister-in-law so that you can do Yibum. You chose not to do chalitza. In that case, now your opportunity is gone. You're not allowed to marry her ever again. If he does go ahead and do kiddushin, the kiddushin will be valid. The reason is because even though this is eshet ach, and eshet ach is prohibited forever under karet, and therefore if it's karet, then the marriage is not valid. In this case, because he could have done yibum or chalitza, he does chalitza, so it's no longer prohibited as the brother's wife, but rather a different prohibition of asher lo yivneh, which we're going to see, right? That's what she says during the chalitza ceremony. You decided not to build your brother's house, so you will never be able to build your brother's house. And if he goes ahead and sleeps with her anyway, that would be oved alav, but no karet. Because alav and no karet, if he does do kiddushin b'diavad, that kiddushin is valid. So what if we have such a case like that? And this man, the second brother, himself dies, bemet bilo banim. Now, what about the other brothers? Can they perform yibum or chalitza? Oh, so we should say no, because they are prohibited to her. So she is prohibited to them. So too the co-wife also will be prohibited. Here is a chart of what we just said. Reuven is married. Reuven is married. There's four brothers here. Reuven is married to Rachel, and then Shimon, and he dies. Shimon decides chalitza. I don't want to marry Rachel. He does chalitza with her, and then he actually marries her anyway. So that's prohibited. He was oved alav, but he did it anyway, so they're married. He has another wife, Miriam. Now he dies, and now these two women will fall to Levi and Yehuda for Yibum. And here's the problem. Rachel is prohibited to Levi and Yehuda because when Shimon does chalitza, then they also have become prohibited. To what level of prohibition? Well, Shimon was prohibited to her as a rejected a Halusa. A Halusa is only a lav because of Asher lo yivneh. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, Levi and Yehuda have the same prohibition, also is a lav. According to Resh Lakish, however, they remain in their previous prohibition, and just like previously, that was Rachel was their brother's wife, so and that's Isur Karet. So because they're not the ones that did chalitza, so they remain as Isure Karet. Okay, so now they may not do it. Let's go with Isur Karet, because that's what Resh Lakish is going to say, and he's the one asking this question. So because they are Asur Karet to Rachel, so obviously they cannot perform Yibum to her because they cannot do Yibum, and it's Isur Karet, and so the Yibum and Chalitza never applies. So too, it never applies to her co-wife Miriam. And there you go. Here's another case that would fit into the pattern of our Mishnah. That an erva prohibits sarata. And so that's Resh Lakish's question. Why don't you include this case? Okay, good question. Amar lefi shena besarat sara. Rabbi Yochanan answers because in our Mishnah, all those 15 cases, not only was the co-wife prohibited, but the co-wife's co-wife. Right? If a third brother is permitted to marry let's say the daughter of one of the brothers, and then he dies, the co-wife of that third brother also will be prohibited. So it has to be, you have to be able to have a chain, whereas in this case, you cannot have a chain. None of the brothers, no matter how many there are able to marry Rachel, so you can never have a case of a co-wife's co-wife. That's Rabbi Yochanan's answer. Okay. Now we ask a question about his answer. He could have answered differently, but then According to Rabbi Yochanan, those other brothers, they get the same status as Shimon. Shimon, because he did chalitza, now he's forever prohibited, but only a lav. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, Levi and Yehuda also prohibited only according to lav, which means it's true they should not do that. But if they did, then it would be, if they did marry her, it would be a valid marriage. And furthermore, because it's only a chayave lavin, so yibum and chalitza actually does apply. They should not do yibum because it would violate a lav, but they must do chalitza. And so therefore, this actually, he could have answered that more simply. And so actually they could theoretically do yibum, and therefore the co-wife is not exempt. So it doesn't fit in. Okay, at least according to Rabbi Yochanan. So we answer, the Lidvarav Kamar Le. Rabbi Yochanan was speaking for the Resh Lakish. According to me, they're chayav lavin, and therefore they are within the category of chalitza and yibum, and so they would need to do chalitza and the or they could do yibum with the co-wife. And then, so therefore, it's not a good example of the 15. But I was giving an answer according to you, Resh Lakish. You asked me the question. I wanted to give you an answer that even you would agree with according to your system. And they are, and that's why I said, because there's no possibility for a co-wife's co-wife in such a case. All right, fascinating discussion. We continue to elaborate more. Itemad ha-choletz levimto vechazar vekidesha. Okay, so we said someone who does chalitza to his yavam and goes ahead and does kiddushin. Amar Resh Lakish hu en chayav al hachalusa karet v'achin chayavin al hachalusa karet. We are bringing the source for this machloket and showing that according to Resh Lakish, the Yavam himself who did chalitza is no longer chayav karet, even though it's his brother's wife, and the brother's wife generally is isur karet. But now that he did chalitza, it's the lesser level, only a lav. But the brothers who did not perform chalitza, chayavin al halusa karet, they remain in the previous relationship of being a brother's wife. And Resh Lakish also says, al hasara ben achim chayavin al hasara karet, regarding the co-wife, right, of in that relationship, both he and the brothers are chayavin on the sarah karet, because the sarah was not involved in the chalitza process, and so the sarah will remain prohibited. Okay, this actually would fit better with the following case here. It's a variation. Reuven is married to two women, and he dies. Shimon performs chalitza on Rachel only. Okay, so what's it chalitza on Rachel? For sure, everyone agrees that Shimon and Rachel, this would be an isur lav only of asher lo yivneh. Because he did chalitza, he rejected her, he cannot take her again. As yibum, that's only isur lav. But for Miriam, he didn't do chalitza to Miriam, so Miriam remains what she was before, a brother's wife, and therefore isur karet. And for the other brothers, Levi and Yehuda, who did not perform chalitza, they are prohibited to both women under karet, because they didn't do chalitza themselves. So only the one who does chalitza has a lav. Everyone else, only this relationship has isur lav. All other relationships are karet. That is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yochanan Amar ben hu ben achin enan chayavin lo ala halusa karet velo ala sara karet. Says nobody, not him and not he and not the brothers and not her and not the halusa and not the sara. None of them are chayave karet. So we'll see why. My tamad Shakish. The reason for Shakish is Amar Kera Asher Lo Yivne. Kevan Shelo Bana Shuv Lo Yivne. Okay, the reason why the brother who did chalitza is prohibited with a lav is because he violates. The pasuk says, "You did not build your brother's house, therefore you will not build your brother's house forever." That's why it's in the future tense here. He, the choletz is the only one who is subject to this lo yivneh. The other ones, the other brothers, remain in their previous status as just a regular case. If a brother dies, or brother's alive, or a brother's dead, no matter what, his wife is prohibited forever, except for yibum, and then it's not yibum. So therefore, isur karet. And only the Halusa is subject to this lo yivne hasara kede kaime. But the co-wife, she remains the same as she was before. She was not involved in the Halisa ceremony. Okay, that's all Resh Lakish. V'Rabbi Yochanan mi kamidi de mikara. Iba'e hai chalis, v'iba'e hai chales. Yochanan says this doesn't make sense. How can you have such a case where any of the brothers could have done chalitza, and they could have done chalitza to any of the co-wives? They could have chosen this one or that one. And so therefore, at that point, before anyone does chalitza, right, all brothers are eligible to do chalitza, and they are also eligible to do chalitza. So now they're permitted to her. And how are you going to say, after they're all permitted to each other to do yibum, that just because one of the brothers performs chalitza, now all of a sudden it reverts back to karet? No, that's impossible. It should remain lav, okay? Because even though only one did it, they all remain lavin. Ela ihu shilichuta de achim kaved shilichuta de sarah ka'avda. A fascinating way of thinking about yibum. She is doing, the brother is doing chalitza, is the messenger of the other brothers, and she, the woman who is the halusa, she is the messenger of the other wives. So the point is, even though, yeah, you're right, it's only Shimon doing the chalitza, but so what? He's doing it on behalf of everyone else. And so it's as if everyone's doing chalitza. And so therefore, since none of them decided that I want to do yibum, they are all subject to the prohibition of asher lo yivneh, which is only a lav. And so to the two women, she happened to do it, but she could have done it also. So both are prohibited only as a lav. And that is the source of Rabbi Yochanan's opinion that everything here is a lav. Okay, one last question. Rabbi Yochanan is going to challenge Rabbi Yochanan from the following baraita that says someone who does chalitza with his yevama and then does kiddushin or with her, and then he dies. Siricha chalitza. The brothers have to do chalitza with that woman. Now, why would they have to do chalitza? If they are only chayav lavin, then that's why you still have to do chalitza, because yibum and chalitza does apply even when there's an isur lav. So Rabbi Yochanan says it makes all sense to me that all the brothers are only chayav lavin. According to you, that the other brothers who didn't do chalitza originally are now chayav karet. So chayav karet don't have to do yibum or chalitza. So you wouldn't have to do a chalitza. How do you explain this baraita? The Shakish answers, Ema Sefa, I will quote to you the continuation of that very baraita. Amad echad menachim b'kiddusha. And la'alav kilum. One goes and he does kiddushin and gives her a ring and everything. That marriage does not take effect. There's no claim about it. So why would there be no claim? Why would there be no kiddushin? Only because it's chayav karet. Anytime you try to do kiddushin, if it's chayav karet, it does not apply. But according to you, Rabbi Yochanan, if it's only a lav, amay en la'alav kilum. Why not? Right. The general opinion is that if it's chayav lavin, then the marriage does work. Amar Rav Sheshat Sefa Atan Rabbi Akiva Amar En Kiddushin Tofsin by Chayave Lavin. So Rav Sheshat says, you know what? The sefa of that baraita must be the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, although I've been saying the general rule the whole time, Rabbi Akiva does not agree with that rule. He says that Kiddushin does not apply, cannot take effect, even in Chayave Lavin, not only Isure Karet. And so, so we can explain that this is in fact, Rabbi Yochanan can explain that this is in fact Chayave Lavin. And the reason why, if one does Kiddushin, it takes no effect, is because it happens to be the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Now, question: if it's only the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, the Braita should say, according to Rabbi Akiva, there is no marriage here, but it's only his opinion. You should indicate that if the Braita is against the majority opinion, and we say Kashya, you know what? You're right. That is in fact a serious question. And we'll leave it at that for today. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.